Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he stared at the scanner display. 20 years of salvage work had taught him to recognize the difference between space junk and something valuable. What he was looking at now made his heart race. The object floating 3 kilometers away was definitely not human-made. The ship was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. Its hull seemed to be made of some kind of crystal that caught and bent the light from the nearby star. The vessel was about 200 meters long, shaped like a teardrop that had been stretched and twisted by an artist who understood physics better than any human engineer. Even damaged, with scorch marks along its sides and a gaping hole and damaged. What might have been its engine section, it was the most elegant thing Jake had ever seen. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered, running his rough hands through his graying hair. His small salvage ship, the Lucky Strike, felt like a rusty tin can compared to the alien vessel. Jake had been working the Kepler debris field for 5 years, picking through the wreckage of old human battles and failed colonies. He had never found anything like this. The scanner showed no life signs, no active power sources, and no weapons charging. Whatever had happened to this ship, it was over. Jake checked his air supply and made sure his tools were secure. First rule of salvage work was to never go aboard an unknown vessel unprepared. Second rule was to never go alone, but Jake had been breaking that rule for years. He suited up and fired the maneuvering thrusters, bringing the Lucky Strike alongside the alien ship. Up close, the crystal hull looked even stranger. It wasn't smooth like he expected, but covered in tiny patterns that seemed to shift when he wasn't looking directly at them. Jake found what looked like an airlock, though it was round instead. Of rectangular like human designs, the airlock opened to his touch, which surprised him. The inner chamber was just big enough for 2 people, with walls that glowed softly when he entered. Jake felt his boots stick to the floor as artificial. Gravity kicked in. His suit's atmosphere scanner showed breathable air on the other side of the inner door, but he kept his helmet on. He wasn't stupid. The corridor beyond the airlock took his breath away. The walls curved upward to form a ceiling that seemed to flow like frozen water. Soft blue light came from somewhere inside the walls themselves, giving everything a peaceful, underwater feeling. The floor was smooth and warm under his feet, even through his heavy boots. Jake walked slowly down the corridor, his helmet light adding harsh white beams to the gentle blue glow. The ship was clearly built for beings about his size, maybe a little taller. Doorways were oval instead of rectangular, and everything had that same flowing, organic look. It was like being inside a living thing that had been turned to crystal. He found what might have been a control room about 50 meters from the airlock. Banks of dark panels lined the walls, and a chair that looked more grown than built sat in the center. Jake approached carefully, his scanner clicking as it tried to identify the materials around him. The readings made no sense. The chair seemed to be made of the same crystal as the hull, but it was warm to the touch and slightly soft, like it was alive. Jake spent an hour exploring the ship, mapping its layout in his head. There were maybe 30 rooms total, connected by corridors that branched and curved in patterns that seemed random but felt right somehow. He found what looked like sleeping quarters, with bed-shaped alcoves built into the walls. A large room that might have been for eating, with a high ceiling and windows that showed the stars outside. And deep in the ship's center, a room full of equipment he couldn't even begin to understand. By the time he made it back to the Lucky Strike, Jake's mind was racing. This wasn't just salvage anymore. This was the discovery of a lifetime. The alien ship was intact enough to be studied, maybe even repaired. A technology inside could change everything for humanity. But more importantly for Jake, it could be converted into the workshop he had always dreamed of. Jake had been running his small salvage operation out of the Lucky Strike for years, but the ship was cramped and limited. He had always wanted a real workshop, a place where he could take on bigger jobs and maybe train some apprentices. The alien ship was perfect. It was big enough, sturdy enough, and far enough from the main shipping lanes that he could work in. Peace. He was already planning where to install his equipment when his communicator beeped. The display showed an incoming message from Lisa Grant, his occasional partner and the closest thing he had to family. Lisa was a former military engineer who had helped him on his bigger salvage jobs. She was smart, careful, and had a talent for making sense of alien technology that the military had found over the years. Jake smiled as he opened the message. Lisa's face appeared on the small screen, her short blonde hair messy like she had just woken up. She was calling from her own ship, a steady hand, probably somewhere in the inner colonies. "Hey, Jake," she said, her voice crackling through the static. "Got your message about a big find. You know I don't like it when you go exploring alone. What have you gotten yourself into this time?" Jake looked back at the alien ship floating. Beside him, the crystal hull caught the starlight and threw it back in patterns that seemed almost like writing. He had a feeling that this discovery was going to change his life in ways he couldn't imagine. But right now, all he could think about was turning that beautiful, mysterious vessel into the workshop of his dreams. "Lisa," he said into the communicator, "you need to get out here as fast as you can. I found something that's going to make us rich. Or famous, or maybe both." Lisa Grant arrived 3 days later, her ship docking smoothly with the alien vessel. Jake watched her through the airlock window as she suited up, her movements quick and professional. Even after knowing her for 8 years, he still felt better when she was around. Lisa had a way of seeing problems before they became dangerous. "This is incredible," Lisa said as soon as she stepped inside the alien ship. Her voice echoed strangely in the curved corridors. She ran her gloved hands along the crystal walls, watching the patterns shift under her touch. "Jake, do you have any idea what this is made of? My scanner can't identify the material." Jake led her through the ship, showing her the rooms he had. Explored, Lisa stopped at every doorway, taking readings and making notes on her tablet. She was more careful than Jake, checking for radiation and toxins at each step. It was the kind of thinking that had kept her alive during her military service. "The air is clean," she said, pulling off her helmet. Her short hair was damp with sweat. "Whatever these beings breathed, it's close enough to our atmosphere. That's either a huge coincidence or ... double quotes." She trailed off, frowning at her readings. "Or what?" Jake asked. "Nothing. Probably nothing." But Lisa's frown deepened as they walked. They reached the central room that Jake had found earlier. It was filled with equipment that looked more like art than machinery. Tall structures made of the same crystal material rose from the floor, connected by tubes that pulsed with faint light. In the center of it all was a platform covered in what looked like control panels. "This has to be their computer system," Lisa said, approaching the platform carefully. "Look at these interfaces. They're designed for hands like ours. 5 fingers, opposable thumbs. These aliens were built a lot like humans." Jake watched as Lisa pulled out her portable computer and a tangle of cables. She was the best tech specialist. He knew, able to make different systems talk to each other even when they came from different planets. If anyone could crack an alien computer, it was Lisa. "Be careful," Jake warned. "We don't know what kind of security they might have had." Lisa nodded, connecting her cables to what looked like data ports on the alien console. Her computer screen flickered as it tried to establish a connection. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then suddenly, the entire room came alive. Light blazed from every surface. The crystal structures began to hum with energy. Holographic displays appeared in the air around them, showing star maps, technical diagrams, and streams of alien text that moved too fast to follow. Jake stumbled backward as a three-dimensional image of the galaxy materialized above their heads. "Lisa, what did you do?" Jake shouted over the humming sound. "I don't know." Lisa's fingers flew over her keyboard, trying to understand the flood of data pouring into her computer. It's like the whole ship was just waiting for someone to wake it up. The power systems are coming online all over the vessel. The alien text on the displays began to slow down, and Lisa's translation software started making sense of the symbols. Words appeared on her screen in English, replacing the flowing alien script. "I'm getting something," Lisa said, her voice tight with concentration. "It's a log entry. Something about the Vorthik Collective. That must be what these aliens called themselves." Jake moved closer, reading over her shoulder. The translated text was choppy and full of gaps, but it was readable. "Mission log, Research Vessel Silent Seeker," Lisa read aloud. "Final approach to target system. The young species shows unexpected resistance to standard suppression protocols. Recommend immediate biological study before proceeding with harvest operations." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. Harvest operations? What does that mean? Lisa's face had gone pale. She scrolled through more of the translated text, her expression growing more worried with each line. "Jake, I think these aliens were studying someone. Some other species they called the young ones, or the primitives, and it doesn't sound like they had friendly intentions." More displays activated around the room, showing star charts marked with symbols that Lisa's computer couldn't translate yet. But Jake could see patterns in the maps. Trade routes, maybe, or invasion paths. The markers seemed to point toward one region of space. "Can you tell where these maps are centered?" Jake asked. Lisa worked at her keyboard, comparing the alien star charts to human navigation data. After several minutes, she stopped typing and stared at her screen. "Jake," she said quietly, "these maps show our part of the galaxy, and that cluster of systems they've marked as the target. That's where Earth is." The humming in the room seemed to grow louder. More text appeared on the displays, and Lisa's translation software struggled to keep up. Jake caught fragments of translated phrases. Biological compatibility, resistance factors, preliminary specimen collection. "They were studying humans," Lisa said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The Vorthik were here, in our system, watching us. This ship was some kind of research vessel." Jake looked around the room with new eyes. The beautiful crystal structures suddenly seemed sinister. The gentle lighting felt cold. This wasn't just an alien ship they had found. It was a spy vessel that had been sent to study humanity. "How long ago?" Jake asked. Lisa scrolled through more data, looking for dates. The alien time system was hard to translate, but she found references to stellar positions that she could match against human astronomical records. Best guess? About 50 years ago? Right around the time humans started spreading to other star systems. Lisa looked up from her computer, her face grim. "Jake, what if this ship didn't just crash here by accident? What if it was fleeing from something?" Before Jake could answer, new displays lit up around the room. These showed technical diagrams of weapons, ships, and what looked like battle formations. The images were clearly military in nature, showing attack patterns and invasion strategies. "My God," Lisa breathed, studying the tactical displays. They weren't just studying us. They were planning to invade. This whole ship is full of intelligence data about humanity. Jake felt the weight of their discovery settling on his shoulders. This wasn't just advanced technology they could use for their workshop. This was evidence of humanity's first contact with hostile aliens. And somewhere in this ship's memory banks was the story of what had happened when the Vorthik had tried to carry out their plans. "We need to see more of these logs," Jake said, his voice hard. We need to know what happened to them. And we need to know if they're coming back. Jake spent the next 2 days trying to access deeper levels of the ship's computer system. The basic logs that Lisa had translated were disturbing enough, but he knew there had to be more. The Vorthik wouldn't send a research ship without detailed mission orders and results. He found what he was looking for in a sealed section of the ship's memory core. The data partition was protected by multiple layers of encryption, each one more complex than the last. It took Lisa's best decryption software and 18 hours of processing time to crack it open. Got it, Lisa announced, her eyes red from staring at screens. But Jake, this section is marked with warning symbols. Lots of them. Whatever's in here, the aliens didn't want anyone to see it. Jake leaned over her shoulder as the first files opened. The text that appeared made his blood run cold. Mission. Classification. Extermination Protocol 7, Lisa read aloud. Species designation. Sol 3 inhabitants. Threat level. Extreme. Recommendation. Complete biological suppression before expansion beyond home system. Extermination? Jake's voice cracked. They were planning to wipe us out? Lisa scrolled through more files, her face growing paler with each document. It gets worse. Look at this. They have detailed biological data on humans. Blood samples, tissue analysis, genetic mapping. They've been studying us for decades. The files showed photographs that made Jake's stomach turn. Human subjects in what looked like laboratory settings, connected to alien machines. The faces in the pictures were unconscious, but Jake could see the terror in their expressions even in sleep. Men, women, even children, all being studied like lab rats. Where did they get these people? Jake whispered. Missing persons reports. Maybe, Lisa said grimly. People who vanished without a trace. Hikers, travelers, anyone isolated enough that their disappearance wouldn't cause too much investigation. Jake forced himself to keep reading. The Vorthik had been thorough in their research. They had studied human anatomy, psychology, social structures, and military capabilities. But as Jake read deeper into their reports, he began to notice something strange in the alien observations. Lisa, look at this section, he said, pointing to a series of tactical analyses. They're not just studying us. They're afraid of us. Lisa frowned and read the translated text. The Vorthek researchers had documented dozens of encounters with human military forces. But their reports didn't read like the confident observations of a superior species. They read like the worried notes of scientists who had found something they didn't understand. Subject species displays irrational tactical behavior, one report stated. Individual units continue fighting despite fatal injuries. Command structure remains functional, even when leadership is eliminated. Recommend. Immediate revision of suppression protocols. Another file contained what looked like video footage from a battle. The images were grainy and distorted, but Jake could make out human ships engaging Vorthik vessels. What he saw didn't make sense. The human ships were clearly outgunned and outnumbered, but they kept fighting with a ferocity that seemed to shock. They're alien opponents. They expected us to surrender, Lisa said, studying the tactical data. Look at these projections. The Vorthik thought they could defeat human forces using standard intimidation tactics, but it didn't work. Jake found more combat reports buried in the files. Each one told a similar story. Human forces that refused to give up even when defeat was certain. Soldiers who sacrificed themselves to save their comrades. Civilians who fought back against alien forces with whatever weapons they could find. Here's something about our technology, Lisa said, opening another file. The Vorthik were tracking human technological development. But look at these dates. We were advancing faster than they predicted. The alien reports showed human progress in space travel, weapons development, and communication systems over a 50-year period. The Vorthik had expected human technology to advance slowly and predictably. Instead, they found a species that innovated at an alarming rate, often finding solutions that their computer models said were impossible. "They call us dangerously creative," Jake read from one report. "Says here that human engineering techniques defy logical progression patterns. We solve problems by thinking outside established parameters." But the most disturbing files were the ones dealing with human psychology. The Vorthik had tried to understand what made humans tick, and their findings clearly troubled them. Subject: species demonstrates extreme pack loyalty. One psychological profile stated, individual survival instincts are frequently overridden by group protection behaviors. This makes standard divide and conquer strategies ineffective. Another report analyzed human leadership patterns. The aliens couldn't understand how human societies functioned without rigid hierarchical control. They were baffled by concepts like democracy, individual rights, and voluntary cooperation. "They don't get us at all," Lisa said, shaking her head. "To them, we're like some kind of impossible species that shouldn't exist according to their understanding of evolution." Jake found the final mission reports near the end of the encrypted files. These documents told the story of the Silent Seeker's last assignment. The ship had been ordered to collect final biological samples and return to Vorthik space with recommendations for the invasion of Earth, but something had gone wrong. The final log entries were fragmented and desperate. The Silent Seeker had been detected by human forces while conducting its research. What followed was a running battle that had lasted for days. "They underestimated our detection capabilities," Lisa said, reading the tactical logs. "The ship's stealth systems were designed to work against other Vorthik vessels, not human sensors. We found them." The battle reports made for grim reading. Human ships had pursued the Silent Seeker across 3 star systems, refusing to let it escape. The alien crew had tried every evasion technique in their manuals, but the human forces kept coming. "Look at this last entry," Jake said, his voice quiet. "The ship's commander says they can't understand human persistence. They keep referring to our forces as relentless and impossible to discourage." The final log entry was written as the Silent Seeker fled toward the debris field where Jake had found it. The alien commander had concluded that humanity represented a threat unlike anything the Vorthik Collective had ever encountered. Not because humans were technologically superior, but because they were unpredictable, adaptable, and absolutely refused to give up. Recommendation to High Command, the last entry read. Species designation Saw 3 poses existential threat to collective survival. Standard suppression protocols ineffective. Subjects display resistance patterns that exceed all established parameters. Immediate withdrawal from sector advised pending development of new containment strategies. Jake stared at the screen, trying to process what he had learned. The aliens hadn't been defeated by superior human technology or overwhelming force. They had been driven away by something much more fundamental, by the simple fact that humans never knew when to quit. "Jake," Lisa said softly, "if this ship made it back to their territory, if they reported what they found here ... then every alien civilization in the galaxy knows about us now," Jake finished. "And they know we're not going to be easy to deal with." Jake couldn't sleep that night. He kept thinking about the files they had discovered, about the humans who had been taken and studied like animals. Lisa found him in the ship's control room at dawn, staring at the holographic displays that still showed Vorthik battle plans. "I've been going through more of their research data," Lisa said, setting down 2 cups of coffee. "Jake, you need to see what else they found out about us." She activated a new set of files, these ones containing what looked like sociological studies. The Vorthik had spent years watching human settlements, recording everything from how families interacted to how governments made decisions. Their observations read like the notes of confused scientists trying to understand an alien species that made no sense. "Look at this report about human child rearing," Lisa said, pointing to a translated document. They couldn't figure out why human parents invest so much time and energy in their young. According to their calculations, the resources spent on raising children could be better used for individual survival. Jake read over the alien analysis of human families. The Vorthic researchers had documented human parents working multiple jobs to provide for their children, sacrificing their own comfort and safety for the next generation. To the aliens, this behavior was economically wasteful and evolutionarily disadvantageous. They don't understand love, Jake realized, or loyalty, or any of the things that make us human. Lisa nodded and opened another file. This one's about human response to natural disasters. They observed the earthquake in New Angeles 15 years ago. Watched their analysis of the rescue efforts. The Vorthic had recorded video footage of humans pulling survivors from collapsed buildings, often risking their own lives to save strangers. The alien commentary was filled with confusion and mathematical calculations trying to explain why humans would endanger themselves for people they didn't even know. Subjects display persistent altruistic behavior that provides no genetic or survival advantage, one report stated. Individual units regularly sacrifice personal safety for the welfare of unrelated individuals. This pattern contradicts all established evolutionary models. Jake found similar reports about human behavior during wars, famines, and other crises. In every case, the Vorthic observers had documented humans helping each other, sharing resources, and refusing to abandon the weak or injured. To the aliens, this was not admirable behavior, but a dangerous flaw that should have led to human extinction long ago. "Here's something interesting," Lisa said, opening a file marked with priority symbols. "This is a report from a Vorthic infiltrator who spent 6 months living among humans on a frontier colony. The infiltrator had disguised itself somehow and joined a human mining operation on a distant world. Its mission was to study human work patterns and social structures from the inside. But what it found clearly disturbed the alien command structure. Human workers display unprecedented cooperation levels," the report began. "Despite individual resource competition, subjects regularly share tools, knowledge, and assistance without compensation agreements. When mining accident trapped 12 subjects underground, entire colony population worked continuously for 4 days without rest to effect rescue. Behavior cannot be explained by standard survival models." The infiltrator had also observed human innovation in action. When the mining equipment broke down, the human workers had improvised repairs using materials that weren't designed for the purpose. They had solved problems by combining different technologies in ways that the Vorthic engineering manuals said were impossible. "They call us intuitive engineers," Jake said, reading another section. "Says we solve technical problems using methods that bypass logical progression steps. We just ... figure things out." Lisa pulled up video footage that the infiltrator had secretly recorded. Jake watched human miners working together to extract ore from a particularly difficult seam. When their cutting tools failed, they rigged up a new system using spare parts from 3 different machines. The solution was crude but effective, and they had invented it in less than an hour. "Look at the alien analysis of this footage," Lisa said. They ran computer simulations trying to predict what the humans would do when the equipment failed. Their best models suggested the humans would either request new equipment or abandon the mining site. They never predicted we'd just build new tools from scratch. Jake found more reports about human technological development. The Vorthic had been tracking human progress for decades, expecting it to follow predictable patterns based on other species they had studied. Instead, they found a civilization that advanced in sudden jumps, often making breakthrough discoveries that seemed to come from nowhere. "They monitored our space program," Lisa said, showing him satellite footage of early human rocket launches. According to their calculations, it should have taken us another 200 years to achieve reliable interstellar travel. But we did it in 50. The Dvorthik analysis of human scientific progress was filled with terms like impossible acceleration and non-linear development patterns. They had documented human scientists making discoveries that contradicted established theories, then building new technologies based on those discoveries within decades rather than centuries. Here's a psychological profile that explains a lot, Jake said, finding a comprehensive study of human mental patterns. They tested human problem-solving abilities and compared them to other species they've encountered. The results had clearly shocked the Dvorthik researchers. Humans scored lower than average on standard intelligence tests, but far higher on creative thinking and adaptability measures. The aliens had concluded that human minds work differently from any other species they had studied. Subjects demonstrate unprecedented ability to process contradictory information and generate novel solutions, the report stated. Standard logic patterns are frequently abandoned in favor of intuitive reasoning that produces superior results. This cognitive flexibility appears to be species-wide trait rather than individual variation. Lisa found the section on human military psychology, and both of them fell silent as they read it. The Dvorthik had studied human soldiers captured during their covert operations, trying to understand what made human military forces so effective despite technological disadvantages. They couldn't break them, Jake said quietly. Look at these interrogation reports. The Dvorthik used psychological techniques that had worked on dozens of other species, but the human prisoners just endured. The alien interrogators had documented human soldiers who refused to reveal information, even under extreme duress. They had recorded prisoners who encouraged their fellow captives, organized resistance within the detention facilities, and maintained unit cohesion even in isolation. The Dvorthik concluded that human military psychology was fundamentally different from other species. Subject species displays abnormal loyalty to abstract concepts, one report noted. Individual survival instincts are consistently overridden by commitment to ideological principles. Subjects prefer death to betrayal of unit, nation, or species. This behavior pattern makes standard suppression techniques ineffective. Jake found the final psychological assessment buried at the end of the files. It was a comprehensive analysis of humanity's potential as a galactic civilization, written by the Dvorthik's best xenopsychologists. The conclusions were sobering. Species designation Sol 3 represents unprecedented challenge to collective expansion, the report concluded. Subjects combine technological adaptability with psychological resilience that exceeds all established parameters. Standard conquest protocols ineffective. Recommend immediate development of containment strategies before subjects achieve interstellar military capability. Too late for that, Lisa said grimly. We're already out here. Jake stared at the alien assessment of his own species. The Dvorthik had studied humanity for decades, analyzed their strengths and weaknesses, and reached a terrifying conclusion. Humans weren't just another primitive species to be conquered or controlled. They were something new in the galaxy, something that threatened the established order simply by existing. They're afraid of us, Jake said finally. Not because we're stronger or smarter than them. They're afraid because we're different, because we do things they can't predict or understand. Lisa nodded, looking at the star maps that still glowed around them. And now they're out there somewhere, probably telling every other alien civilization about the dangerous new species from Sol System. The species that doesn't know when to quit. Jake stood in the ship's central chamber, surrounded by floating displays showing the complete map of Dvorthik space. 3 weeks had passed since they first activated the alien computer, and now he understood the full scope of what they had discovered. The Silent Seeker contained more than just research about humanity. It held the military secrets of an entire galactic empire. 237 worlds, Lisa said, reading from her tablet. That's how many planets the Vorthic Collective controls. And every single one of them used to belong to someone else. The ship's database told a story of conquest that spanned thousands of years. The Vorthic had perfected the art of taking over other civilizations. They would study a species for decades, learn their weaknesses, then strike with precisely targeted weapons and tactics. It had worked every time until they encountered humanity. Jake walked among the holographic displays, studying the tactical information. The Vorthic had detailed records of their military capabilities, ship designs, and weapon technologies. They also had complete star charts showing hyperspace routes, supply lines, and defensive positions. It was intelligence that human military commanders would kill for. The question is, what do we do with all this? Lisa asked. That question had been haunting Jake for days. His original dream of converting the alien ship into a workshop seemed laughably small now. This wasn't just about building a better repair facility. They had stumbled onto information that could change the balance of power in the galaxy. We could turn it over to Earth Command, Lisa suggested. Let the military decide how to use it. Jake shook his head. You know what they'd do. They'd build bigger weapons, plan preemptive strikes, turn us into the same kind of conquerors the Vorthic were. And what? We can't just ignore this. The Vorthic are still out there, and now they know about us. They might be planning another attack right now. Jake found himself staring at a section of the database that showed Vorthic methods for dealing with problematic species. The aliens had faced resistance before, but never like what they encountered with humanity. Their solution was always the same: complete extermination of any species that couldn't be controlled. Look at this, Jake said, pulling up files about other civilizations the Vorthic had destroyed. The Kellery Federation, the Omega Syndicate, the Free Traders of Rigel. All of them showed signs of independence or creativity that threatened Vorthic control. So they were wiped out. Lisa studied the records, her face growing pale. Entire species, billions of beings, all dead because they wouldn't submit to alien rule. And we're next on their list, Jake said quietly. Unless we do something about it. Jake spent the next day alone on the ship, thinking about their options. He could contact Earth Command and turn over the intelligence. The military would use it to prepare for war, maybe even launch attacks against Vorthic worlds. But that would make humanity into aggressors, starting a galactic conflict that could last for centuries. He could try to sell the information to private corporations or independent colonies. The technology alone would be worth trillions of credits. But that would scatter the knowledge, making it impossible to coordinate any kind of defense against future Vorthic attacks. Or he could destroy everything, erase the ship's database, and pretend they had never found it. But that would leave humanity blind to the threat still lurking somewhere in deep space. When Lisa returned the next morning, she found Jake in the ship's medical bay. He was standing in front of the containment units where the Vorthic had stored their human specimens. The biological samples were still there, preserved in alien stasis fields. I've been thinking about those people, Jake said without turning around. The ones they took for experiments, they never made it home. Never saw their families again. All because some alien empire decided humans were worth studying. Jake, we can't bring them back. No, but we can make sure it doesn't happen again. Jake turned to face her, and Lisa saw a determination in his eyes that she had never seen before. I know what we're going to do with this ship. Over the next few hours, Jake explained his plan. They wouldn't turn the ship over to any government or corporation. Instead, they would use it themselves, but not for profit. They would establish a secret monitoring station using Vorthic technology to watch for signs of alien activity in human space. We become the early warning system, Jake said. We use their own equipment to detect their ships before they can get close to human worlds. And we share that information with everyone. Earth Command, the colonies, independent traders, anyone. Who needs to know? Lisa was skeptical at first. Just the two of us? How are we supposed to monitor an entire galaxy? We start small. Use the ship's sensors to watch the border regions. If we detect anything suspicious, we investigate. And if we find evidence of hostile aliens, we make sure the right people get warned. Jake had already begun modifying the alien systems, combining Vorthic sensors with human communication equipment. The result was a detection network that could spot alien ships at ranges impossible for human technology alone. What about the military data? Lisa asked. The weapon designs, the tactical information. We keep it safe, hidden. If humanity ever faces a direct Vorthic attack, we'll have everything they need to fight back. But until then, we don't give anyone the tools to start an interstellar war. Lisa spent 2 days thinking about Jake's proposal. It would mean giving up their normal lives, dedicating themselves to a mission that might last decades. They would be guardians that no one knew existed, protectors working in the shadows to keep humanity safe. All right, she said finally, but we're going to need help eventually. We can't watch the entire galaxy with just 2 people. Jake smiled for the first time in weeks. I've been thinking about that too. There are other salvage operators out. Here, other engineers and pilots who know how to keep their mouths shut. People who understand what it means to protect something important. They spent the next month preparing the ship for its new role. Jake's workshop dreams weren't completely forgotten. Parts of the vessel were converted into repair bays and equipment storage. But the ship's primary purpose was now surveillance and intelligence gathering. Lisa established communication protocols that would let them share information with human authorities without revealing their location or the source of their intelligence. Jake modified the ship's engines and stealth systems, using Vorthic technology to make them nearly invisible to conventional sensors. On the day they officially began operations, Jake recorded a log entry in the ship's computer. It seemed fitting to use the same system that had once documented humanity's strengths and weaknesses for alien conquest. Personal log, Jake Morrison, he said into the recording device. We've spent our lives fixing broken things, salvaging what others threw away. Now we're salvaging something bigger, humanity's future. The Vorthic thought they understood us. They studied our weaknesses and planned our destruction. But they missed the most important thing about humans. Jake paused, looking around the alien bridge that was now his command center. They missed the fact that when we find something worth protecting, we don't give up. Ever. They underestimated us once. If they try again, they'll find that humans learn from their mistakes, and we never forget who our enemies are. The ships. Systems hummed quietly around them as Jake and Lisa began their watch. Somewhere in the vast darkness of space, the Vorthak Collective was plotting humanity's destruction. But they would no longer be operating in secret. 2 humans in a salvaged alien ship had become the galaxy's most unlikely guardians, using the enemy's own technology to protect the species that refused to surrender. Jake's workshop had become something far greater than he had ever imagined. It was humanity's first line of defense against the darkness between the stars.